This is Wajeeha Aziz, Senior Lecturer in Medical and Clinical Education at University of Sussex.
And this is Raheela, Lecturer in the School of Life Sciences at the University of Liverpool.
And Melody Obeng, postdoctoral researcher in the School of Chemistry at the University of Sheffield.
And Ellie Harrison, Research Fellow at the School of Biosciences, also at the University of Sheffield. And you are listening to the Academy's Developing Practice podcast.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Academy's Developing Practice podcast. In this episode, we chat with Raheela, Wajeeha, Melody and Ellie about their recent article in the Times Higher Education titled Intersectionality is the only way to nurture academics of colour, which explores how we identify the blind spots in EDI efforts to support academics sitting at the intersection of minority identities. We hope you enjoy.
Well, colleagues, we're really pleased to be speaking to you today. Working to ensure equality, diversity and inclusion has been a key priority at our institution and indeed for many colleagues across higher education for a while. And so hearing about your work will be extremely interesting to many. But before we start, we like to get to know our guests a little bit. So could you tell us a bit about your background and how you've arrived at the role you're in today?
Thanks, Alex. I can go first. So really pleased to be here. I'm Wajeeha and I'm a medical doctor by background, and I'm a senior lecturer in medical education at Brighton and Sussex Medical School. I'm an inclusive curriculum lead for postgraduate taught courses, and I'm very keen to promote inclusive practices in medical education.
I am Raheela Aziz, and I am a Director of Integrated Masters in School of Life Sciences. I have been appointed as a Deputy Chair of Race Equality Charter Self-Assessment Team last year as well. And why I am here is mainly because the inclusivity which lies in my teaching and I teach all the way from the year 1 to the master's level, and equality, diversity and inclusivity is what lies at the heart of my teaching.
I'm Melody Obeng. So I'm a postdoc based in the chemistry department, but I have a background in material science as well. And I'm here because I just want to be a part of the conversation, really. I think I I fit into the brand. So, yeah, I'm here to just talk about how the postdoc experience can be complex and, yeah, just add to the conversation.
I'm Ellie Harrison. I'm a fellow at the University of Sheffield in the newly formed School of Biosciences. I've just been interested in ED&I issues just from conversations picked up over coffee that start you on a path of thinking about these ideas. So I'm now ED&I lead for our cluster within the department. But more generally, it's just something that I think is important for everyone to think about.
Fantastic. Thanks, colleagues. And Ellie, how did you all meet? Because you're all from very different universities from across the United Kingdom, aren't you? So how did you all meet?
Well, so I actually lived with Mel for a while, and so this kind of came about because I was part of a group of women. I went on maternity leave, got quite cross about maternity leave, and wrote an article with a group of women about gender equality within academia. And whilst we wrote a series of articles, actually, and whilst writing them, I felt this really, I felt this guilt that we talk a lot about gender within the academic space, and it's because there are actually a lot of voices to add to this discussion. And what I don't see being discussed, and I'm not part of a conversation about often, is other issues like race in this case, or disability. And I live with Mel. We had loads of really interesting conversations between us about these issues, and so we wanted to sort of do the same thing. So bring this conversation into the public sphere. So through this conversation, we reached out through our network and we made contact with Raheela and Wajeeha and started this conversation to write this article.
And what about you, Wajeeha and Raheela? How did you sort of get involved in this? So what prompted you to start looking at this area yourselves?
So actually, I have always been very active about these topics, but I think that taking up the role as a deputy chair, I thought, or I realized that I got a platform to use my lived experience, which I gained over years by studying and working in different geographical zones and multicultural settings. So first I started with delivering talks at school levels, at department level, faculty level, to raise awareness of what the Race Equality Charter is and what are its guiding principles, talking about lack of representation of BAME at senior or leadership roles, attainment gaps between white and BAME students. And during these talks, what I realized that people want to know what are the underlying causes are. And then through one of the audiences, I got introduced to Eleanor, and I have known Wajeeha for her work for the last few years, where her work is more focused on the medicine side, but working a lot on the inclusivity and particularly on the race side of or aspects of the side. So we got in touch with each other and thought we should write something which people are not aware. And with Melody, Wajeeha, and while discussing, we thought to open up and just discuss what barriers we are facing that hinder or has hindered our progression compared to our white colleagues. And it was really surprising, although we always admit about intersectionality, but we were surprised to see that how our experiences differed from each other. We were all three women here. We were all BAME, all in academia, but were facing different challenges. And then this became the theme of our article, as it says that how BAME term encompasses an eye-watering level of diversity and how most of them fall under the amorphous umbrella sitting at the sharp end of intersectional identities of gender, race, religion, class, and immigration status, and how it leads to the lived experiences of BAME or how they can be little resemblances to one another.
Thanks, Raheela. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? So, I mean, I read the article recently, and it did get me thinking. Obviously, today we're trying to drill down into that intersectionality and how we can help institutions explore how they can better support academics of colour. Can I just ask a sort of a blanket question to all guests that we've got on the pod today? What do you think about the term BAME at the moment? Do you think that term or the acronym is actually, do you think that's problematic at the moment?
I think in some ways it is, just because, it's used for convenience because acronyms are just easier in conversation rather than saying the full name. But I think, unfortunately, with that convenience, it sort of erases uniqueness and difference. And so I think we often made the mistake of just thinking that people are a monolith, which we're not. And particularly, I think, especially for ethnic minorities, like even if we speak about, let's say, for example, Africa is always spoken about in the context of like just the continent and not the individual countries. Whereas we know England's England, we never just say Europe. So I think there are pros and cons to using that word. Of course, for the art of conversation, it's great, easy, but I think it does sort of erase the uniqueness between us all, which is a good thing. It's not a bad thing, as sensitive as the topic can be. But yeah, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I think I agree with Melody and Raheela, really, because I think it is important that we maintain that intersectional perspective around race. This is just basically to just reflect on the diverse realities. And as Melody said, it's unique experiences that individuals have. And though race is a very important, but it's a single factor. And as Raheela mentioned, there are different social categories, the gender, nationality, immigration status, your responsibility as a primary carer. So these are all linked and they all, are central and play a very important role in the academic progression for academics of color. And I think that's what we try to highlight in our article. And actually, we did argue by giving just a few examples of lived experiences that more often than not, it acts as a barrier for the progression of academics of color. And therefore, we did emphasize that this intersectional EDI perspective is the way forward.
That's really helpful. And from reading the article, I had started to reflect on this, but it really helped me to reflect on, as you're both saying, that kind of uniqueness within this one category, that, you know, everyone is different. And your work details how the data reveals the barriers, as you've just said, limiting the careers of Black, Asian or minority ethnic colleagues. And that can be very, very different for each individual. Can you explain that to us further in terms of that difference and that individuality?
I was just going to talk about the cultural aspect of it. So I think it's a catch-22, isn't it? Because I think when we, as social beings, we think everyone is like us, even if we realize that there are differences between us. So when it comes to in the context of academia, there's the work aspect, but there's also the socializing aspect, which plays an integral part in how you get to know your colleagues, how you further along in like the career progression of making relevant contacts, whether it's for collaborative work, publications, and that I think is quite. The reason why I think it's a catch-22 is because socially, I think we think it's a lot more easier than it is, and so in one aspect of the article, I was talking about how certain environments, social environments, might not be comfortable for everyone. I mean, going to a pub is a very big thing in British culture. I think it was one of the things that we called back immediately after the pandemic. So it's a big thing for our culture. However, there are some people, even if you are British or if you are living in Britain, you might not identify with every aspect of what is British culture. So it could be for religious reasons, or it could just be like socially, you just don't go to the pub. So you're not going to feel comfortable being in that environment or even want to venture to explore it. So in the article, we were just talking about there are different ways in which we can find common ground, and it doesn't have to always lean towards whatever's popular or common. It could just be things that can be a lot more preferable in social hours. So it could be just going to a coffee shop, or going for dinner. I'm big on games. I think it's the best form of icebreaker. So we could do, I don't know, just something more fun, activity based, kind of break the ice. But I think the whole essence of trying to unpack the different ways in which we can get to know each other was to just open our eyes to the fact that it just doesn't have to be done in one way, and that we actually should consider what are the other ways in which people can feel comfortable and get to know one another and not feel like they have to put themselves in a place of discomfort or miss out on moments which are actually really important to further your career.
So I was just thinking to extend on Melody's point, because I think that it is an important point, because I believe that religious diversity is still not largely recognized, or it remains unacknowledged in academia, and it has a great impact on your sense of belonging. And so in this article, we did give an example of, the colleagues being not invited out of respect to the pubs, but that also means a perceived lack of contribution to those brilliant ideas that can be exchanged during that time, and that might results in you not being named as an investigator on a research grant. And I believe there are many more examples of this, but this shows it could be a typical example of when being inclusive becomes selectively exclusive. So I think that, yes, having this cultural competence and awareness, towards each other is the first way, and it's a sort of a first way forward in tackling these barriers.
So we also mentioned about immigrant penalty to address that, what barriers the first generation who have migrated to the different country, what the barriers they are exposed to. So as you all know, that in academia, your progression is dependent on securing research fundings, building strong national and international networks, successful track record in a specific field of research. Now, it is usually said that if you want to be successful in academia, then your first 10 years after your PhD are very important. But once you cross this time period, the chances of career progression are significantly reduced. Now, if you are a first generation immigrant here who entered the country as a highly skilled worker and joined the academia, you are facing lots of challenges behind the scenes that are adversely affecting the initial 10 to 15 post-migration years. For example, the cost of visas and then renewing those visas between arrival and naturalization. And if you multiply this by the number of family members that have joined them, then you are under an immense financial strain, which is further exacerbated by the lack of free access to government support for health or childcare. And then this are likely to fall disproportionately on women who are the primary caregiver, even when fully employed. So for academics from underdeveloped countries, the visa systems pose more issues as well and result in the exclusion from global academic networks or research opportunities overseas. For example, as we said it is very difficult to get a visa to attend the conference, and it is kind of a lucky draw because it either gets rejected or is delayed due to administrative procedures until the conference date is gone. And all these factors have a lifetime impact, because once you are refused for your visa, then that goes for the lifetime. Even when you get the citizenship, you still are asked that, have you ever been refused to the visa? And if you say yes, so this means that the chances are now very low to attend the conference. So working in academia as a first generation immigrant comes with many added pressures, and where you are surviving to just for every day, then the career progression is very down in the list of the priorities, because the everyday survival is the main issue.
So I think Raheela's experience is kind of, for me, is kind of the nub of this intersectional issue, because, you know, as I said, I started this whole writing articles business having gone on maternity leave. So I've relatively recently had a baby, and I'm dealing with everything that entails, the expenses, the trying to keep up with your career. And, you know, as academics, it's a really high pressure career. We're often, you know, a major earner in the family, so our income really matters. And just recognizing how much that you're sort of treading water, trying to just keep your head above, and then to see the additional layer of coming from a background, being an academic of color, or having this immigration status that's making everything not only much more challenging but also much more financially pressured, is just, it's compounding experiences that we tend to box up when we think about ED&I issues into, this is about women, this is about race, this is about disability. But actually, when you multiply these things together, you are moving from a position where you're kind of struggling to where you really are having to push against really significant barriers. So I guess that's my perspective of someone who isn't coming from this BAME background.
No, I think that makes really good sense. How you've explained it there about the compounding of issues. That I think that probably speaks to everybody who's probably listening to the podcast around, you know, if you are a person of colour, then you are a caregiver, and you know you might be on maternity leave. All these things can compound on top of each other and make sort of life in academia more difficult than it probably should be. Just touching on the Times Higher Education article, obviously I mentioned it earlier, and the link will be in the show notes, but that draws particularly on real experiences of BAME women in academia, and to highlight the challenges that most have impacted their career progression. Now, we sort of touched on the immigration side, of the immigration penalty, as it's known in that article. And I think Melody talked about the culture, but there was another area in there around the comfort penalty. Can you just give us a little bit of an explanation as what were you meaning by the comfort penalty?
Yeah, the comfort penalty is pretty much an extension of what I mentioned before, which is, yeah, we all have our different social spheres, and I think we think that people have similarly lived experiences, but then there's also differences. So in the article I mentioned how my experience moving to Sheffield for work was very different, because I came from down south in London, and I really thought Sheffield was quite similar to Manchester, where I did my undergrad. And Manchester is a very multicultural city. It's like very easy to kind of find Afro-Caribbean food stores or hair care products. So when I came to Sheffield, and I literally I found myself Googling, where can I find the places that were easily accessible in London or Manchester. That's what I just wanted to kind of highlight in the article. So when it comes to moving away for work, there are so many factors. I think it depends on what your lived experience is that you have to consider. So for some, it's the visa, trying to fit in socially as well. But in the practical stuff, finding the foods that I eat, or finding the products that I need to take care of my hair, which, I mean, now things are changing. You see a bit of Afro hair care in Superdrug and Boots, but the lines are not as broad and as extensive as Afro-Caribbean stores that have everything. So the comfort penalty is just basically trying to assimilate in a city that isn't as accommodating of your cultural diversity. And I hope that was conveyed in the article.
So, I think what really stood out when we had this conversation is the experiences and the kind of the issues that Mel and Wajeeha were discussing were a lot about inclusion and that idea of being part of the culture. But actually, when I was listening to them talk, these your different experiences, I from my perspective, seem to be quite different. You know, Wajeeha is a more senior academic as a PI in a department, compared to Mel as a postdoc in a lab group. And the difference between, are you invited to, because academia is something where a lot of formal activities happen in informal settings. So are you being included in those spaces is one question, but also, are you kind of comfortable in the what's the word? The kind of communal environment that you're existing in and trying to progress in. And those two, for me, seemed distinct issues, and that's why we made them separate. So, I mean, I don't, Wajeeha, if you have any perspective on why there is a sort of difference between this just inclusion issue and this comfort issue.
No, I absolutely agree with Ellie. I think there are different issues. So, as I said before, to have an conducive environment around you that gives you that sense of belonging, that's one aspect. And the second is that you are called for the expertise that you have. That is your right. So you don't feel like you are outcasted because you were not a part of the conversation, that you were not sitting next door or, on the next seat. So that is that your capabilities are recognized the way it should be. So there are different aspects, and that's why there are two different experiences. And that's why it is important to understand this intersectional aspect to it. So yeah, I do agree what you said, Ellie.
I wanted to add that I think sometimes you try and compartmentalize career and just well-being. And really, you need to be well to do career. And so I think sometimes it doesn't just include being in those spaces where you can interact with your colleagues, but it's actually being in the right frame of mind. And that encompasses where you feel like you belong, or where you can say you can establish a home. So there's very delicate relationship between furthering career and well-being, which I think that needs to be highlighted as well.
Absolutely.
So I just thinking about what Mel's saying, I'm part of a DTP, so I'm on the management board for DTP, hiring PhD students. And we've been looking at the application process and rethinking how we do it. And a lot of that is because, so much of this matters, so much of what determines the fate of someone right at the beginning of their careers and throughout depends on things like their comfort, right? If you're comfortable in a culture, you ask for things that you maybe wouldn't have asked for. You're included on the paper, even though you're the bit you did in the lab was maybe arguably not that fundamental as an undergraduate student. All these little moments that differentiate people who are just easily slip into a community versus those who are feel like they have, like Mel used the word assimilate, right? You have to assimilate yourself into that culture. It can tip you down a trajectory that has ultimately quite profound impacts on your career progression. So these things are important, I guess is what I'm saying.
Just what Ali said, that just extending to that Ali said that even if you have a minor contribution, what my experience shows that it is so difficult, even you have a major contribution, that how people acknowledge that. And then again, because of your most of the times your PIs, your line managers are your sponsors. And so there is still a concept of modern slavery there, where you are dependent on them so that your visas can be extended. So, and there to defend yourself that you are the major contributor in the project and you are doing something great, and to get that acknowledged is very important. The publication comes even later, but sometimes you are struggling to tell the people that I am doing something here. And so it is a constant well-being question there, and the career and your survival. So everything mixed together, which is making your everyday life very challenging.
So it's quite interesting what Raheela has said. And I just wanted to add that I was reading about another lived experience of a Black academic. And she was talking about this imposter syndrome, that you're constantly battling with yourself and saying, was I, the appropriate person? Because of the views and responses of those who are opposite to you. And they are telling you, oh, you did get this grant. Oh, is it a big thing for you because you were not capable of doing that? So these all things really put you into this jeopardy and a multitude of different emotions. And this really, I feel like that what she was describing as an imposter syndrome all through my academic career, I always felt that very much. So that's one of the examples also.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Wajeeha, for sharing that with us. I think that's really going to help us reflect. I remember you used a term earlier around our kind of cultural competence, and hearing these perspectives is so important for us all to hear that, everyone's perspective and experience is so very different, and we need to reflect on that. And I think it's great in your work, in your article, that you argue that only an intersectional EDI approach can succeed in nurturing academics of colour. It's understanding these various perspectives that you've shared so kindly with us today. So can you kind of summarise that view for us, that challenge of that we need to understand this kind of intersectional EDI approach?
It's difficult, right? The reason why we approach ED&I in this kind of pillared fashion, where we have, in a department, you'll probably have an ED&I committee, and someone will be in charge of BAME, someone's in charge of disability, etc. So with that structure, taking an ED&I intersectional approach is going to be really difficult. And until we can kind of dissolve that structured mentality, we are kind of trapped in those pillars. But I would say the first and foremost at the ground level, we need to listen to each other. We need to be welcoming in our departments and just get to know our colleagues properly. We need to understand each other better. And from the perspective of someone who's been a kind of awkward white person, we need to not be fearful of, I think we can sometimes prioritize our own comfort, which can feel like it's being, we feel like perhaps we don't want to ask because we don't want to upset, or we don't want to be rude, or we don't want to, more importantly, we don't want to be considered racist. But what we're doing there is we're prioritizing our sense of comfort over including other people in our community. And I think being, it's more important to be open and welcoming and accept that we're maybe gonna say awkward things or ask questions that are naive and stupid, but much better that we go into this with an open heart and be willing to be a bit humble when someone says, what are you talking about? That's a really stupid thing to ask, than to just pretend, right? I think there's a lot of kind of pretending that we don't see diversity and the experiences that these wonderful women that I've worked with have had, where people are making assumptions and those assumptions are excluding them, and they think that they're making them out of trying to be nice or trying to be inclusive, ironically. So from the ground, from the individual level, I think that's where we need to start. As a department and as a ED&I kind of strategy within our universities, we have to recognise that there are issues that are flying under the radar, because we are focused. If we have an ED&I pillar focused on BAME issues, it's going to naturally lean towards issues that are shared by this whole community of extremely diverse people. That's wonderful, but ultimately it's missing a lot of the real barriers that are affecting people's careers. If we try and average away all the experiences that have been shared today, much of that gets lost. The sort of experience of being an immigrant and struggling with the visa system is not relevant to Mel, who's British, right? So does that then becomes deprioritized because it's not a shared challenge? So perhaps auditing how the issues that are faced by our academics within our departments, and putting in place strategies that can help them. I mean, we talked regarding the sort of immigrant challenges. We talked about things that could be done, with no money. Things like recognizing that this is a challenge, that people, in the way that we recognize that mothers coming back to work are dealing with this additional layer of pressure, recognizing this within the career assessment, promotions, probation kind of system, perhaps providing system to check on colleagues that are coming into the departments, so that they can be their challenges can be assessed and be supported in overcoming them, rather than just leaving them on their own. And of course, there's always the issue of money. So things like recognizing that people who do not have citizenship have different financial challenges, and maybe they have less support from the government for help for childcare, for example. So can departments support academics coming in from elsewhere with additional benefits that bring them to parity with the rest of their colleagues?
I was going to add, on the basis of what we can do individually, with the first point you made, is I think just genuine relationship helps with understanding people. So I mean, this podcast shouldn't spark people to suddenly be like, let me go and find a Black friend. Like, it needs to be there has to be a genuine authenticity about it, where you want to just know someone better. So I think that helps pacify hopefully a bit of the nerves. And then I think as someone who is sharing their lived experience, and it's different from it's not what's commonly heard, then I suppose it will give them the confidence to know that it's a safe space if they're sharing it with a friend. So a lot of the conversations that I've had with Ellie, you never came across in that way to me, even though you said that. I thought they felt real, and I was intrigued and I felt comfortable. So I think genuine relationship always helps. With the universities, it's funny because I mean, universities, one aspect of it is that it's a business, right? And so they get money from international applicants or members of staff or students, and it just sounds like there's a gap in the knowledge of knowing, okay, we get your money, but then how are you when you're here? Like, what's life like for you here? When I think in order to have more inclusive conversations like we're having here, we need people who are just like cognizant of these issues. Maybe inviting people that have these lived experience to be a part of the conversation would help. But I honestly think sometimes we just need to just think things through. Let's not overcomplicate it. It just requires a bit more thought. And I think we can think about things more thoroughly when we care. So trying to amp up empathy and understanding people might help, even at like the business level of running a university.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with Melody. I think just to highlight another important point, that these open discussions are very important. And that's why the lived experiences, to share those lived experiences are important. But it's also important to know that the onus is not on the academics of color. It has to be a mutual understanding that we want to know each other. We want to celebrate the culture, the religious backgrounds that we have in our department. So if you open those discussions, if you have those mutual conversations through respect, I think that there will be a culture, there will be an inclusive environment there. It has to be through having the EDI panels, which do have diverse representation, which by that I mean there should be white people sitting there as well, talking about the EDI issues. So it has to be mutual in order to be conducive.
So I when I, in the presentations or in the talks, whenever I quote this principle of race equality charter, that all individuals have multiple identities and the intersection of those different identities should be considered wherever possible, then sometimes I get the reaction that how is it possible? It is so complex. We cannot cover everyone there, and therefore the emphasis is usually that okay, we should mentor these individuals and so that they go for the opportunities and the things like that, like mentoring the BME. The emphasis is more on that, but I feel that the PDRs, the annual reviews, that is the best opportunity where you are in one-to-one contact with your colleague, and the line managers or the supervisors, research supervisors, they are very best positioned at that time to understand that where the barriers have been, and the frameworks are there. If they just put the copy of framework in front of them and see that why this colleague has not been able to progress for so many years, what the barriers were. When they put the emphasis on mentoring or asking us to attend the courses, let's say I attended the leadership course, I came back, if I am not having the opportunity to apply that knowledge, then where that mentorship will go, where that courses will go. Now, you may come up saying that, okay, then create opportunities for yourself. But yes, I can do that. But that will take a long time. And by that time, I see my colleagues have already moved to the next level because they were provided the opportunities easily, while I am finding the opportunities and struggling for that, because then again, people don't know me. First, I have to increase my visibility, and then, so there are lots of steps. But I think that if there is a will to help the people, it is very easy to let them know the opportunities, to fit them in those opportunities where they can say that they are taking up those roles which can help their career progression.
So I guess we miss one of the key. We've been talking around it. One of the key things that everyone can do, right, is to think about the ways that we do interact with our colleagues, and are we creating inclusive spaces? And I think we should be sparking a games revolution. We didn't put this in the article, you did, but I think that's a brilliant idea. And food, right? Food and things like tea and coffee are activities that are really cross culture, and it can be a bit of a shift for people to realise that something that's dear to their hearts, as the pub is to many academics, can be a uncomfortable place for other people. But rather than thinking about it as banning something that people like doing, we should be thinking about as diversifying the ways that we interact and play with our colleagues. Right? If we crack the board games out, maybe genuinely we can make some really effective change.
Absolutely. I completely agree. So I think that's where this intercultural competence comes in, isn't it? This communication, this dialogue going on, this mutual respect for the religious, for cultural events, for each one of the colleagues that you have around. So it's just the beginning of that discussion. So it's definitely not banning something which is a social activity, but there could be many other social activities around. There could be a away day for a lab to brainstorm ideas, really, around some food, some cultural interaction, about the stories that we tell each other, because those narratives are very powerful, because, we all are human beings in the end. So those narratives develop those strong connections, and that's the way forward, I think.
Brilliant. I mean, there's nothing more British in terms of its culture than a board game and a cup of tea. So I think we can knock the pubs on the head, maybe. I think there's not that many people going to pubs anymore anyway. So yeah, I'm all up for a cup of tea and a conversation and a board game. That sounds like a brilliant idea. Just one thing I'd like to pick up just on Raheela, what you just mentioned around mentoring. Obviously, in my role as an organizational developer, sort of mentoring is quite close to the sort of things that I do. So would you advocate that we should be doing more reverse mentoring in that case, where the people of colour are actually mentoring upwards, if you like, to maybe, say, for example, a white APVC or a white vice chancellor, rather than the person of colour going through that mentoring?
That would be a great idea. And that is actually because that will work in many different ways. That it will help the senior leadership to understand the lived experience of someone. They can understand the barriers they are facing, and they can also, they are in the position to offer the opportunities. And not only to that one person they are working with, but to many others as well. Because what I feel is that if any BME individual is in the university, they have reached there because of their talent. So it is now, and when you say that you have to use that talent, then you need to understand that individual, and reverse mentoring would be a very good way to go forward.
So thank you for your time, everybody. It's been a really, really enjoyable conversation. The podcast is known as the Developing Practice Podcast. And so we like to finish each and every episode in the same way, where we get 3 or 4 take-home tips for the listeners that they can reflect on in terms of their own personal practice. So if you can give us a few things, a few tips for thoughts to reflect on, what would they be?
Yeah, sure. This sounds like such a philosophical question. I think what underpins the theme of the article is to think beyond yourself, which I suppose we're not naturally hardwired to do that, but we can all empathize and see how the many ways in which we're fortunate. And so if that's the case, then how are some people unfortunate? And yeah, what can we do to help? So I think from the colleagues, relationships, just get to know people genuinely. And if you're a leader of a group, just foster that culture of just authentic relationships.
I would just say that one should be willing to help, and there should be a transparent annual review system which provides the opportunity to understand your colleagues very well and help them in progressing in their careers.
Well, I think, think about who you are, and more importantly, who you're not interacting with. If you're putting together grant proposals, if you're thinking about a review paper, who are you basing these collaborations on? Who happens to sit next to you at X social event? And if certain colleagues in the department had been next to you in that conversation, would they be included in the work that you're doing? And if so, go and approach them about it. Don't fall back exclusively on these informal interactions.
Yeah, because I think it is a philosophical question. So I will try to give a philosophical answer. So as I said before, I always felt that as an academic of color, it's my responsibility to raise awareness. But today, I would like to shift that responsibility to our listeners. So my take-home tip would be, first and foremost, I would like to invite you to start looking beyond your privilege, and to start reflecting on your social identities and its impact. And then listen and learn and make space for those who are underprivileged and underrepresented. So that's the message from my side.
Brilliant. Thanks for your time today. It's been a great conversation.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, that was a really challenging discussion concerning the difference of lived experiences of our colleagues sitting at the intersection of minority identities. One aspect of the conversation that really stood out to me was the socialising aspect of the lived experience, and how it's so important that the way we socialise as colleagues does not exclude others.
Yeah, it was really interesting what they were saying about the compounding of the multiple issues that make life in academia much more difficult for people of colour. I thought what they said about the comfort penalty really interesting in terms of the really practical things like food and hair care. And this is just something I hadn't thought about before, and something that must make a big difference.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. If you'd like to take your thinking further, we've added some resources and the article itself to the website on a specific podcast reading list, which you can access at liverpool.ac.uk/the-academy/podcast. Also, let us know what you thought about the episode. You can tweet us at LiveUniAcademy, and you can also find us at eLearnerMatt or at Alexandra_Owen on Twitter.
And we're really grateful for those who have taken the time to either rate or review our show in your podcast provider's app. So if you haven't done so already, please do take the time to review our show, or even better, simply share the episode with friends and colleagues on your social media. Bye for now.